All right, let's dive right into this explainer and decode exactly what happens when a strict cosmic auditor meets a meticulous clerk in the absolute most bureaucratic, red tape-filled corner of your astrological chart. Now, if you follow astrology, you already know that planetary placements aren't just vague little personality quirks, right? They dictate highly specific, real-world environments. So today, we're unpacking a notoriously frustrating placement detailed in our source material, the Chronos ledger, Saturn and Mercury combined in the 8th house. We're going to break down exactly what this text says about your paperwork, your shared finances, and how this unique dynamic completely reshapes your mental state.
First, we'll decode the cosmic formula, then navigate the paperwork labyrinth, manage shared wealth, adopt the detective's mindset, and finally, we'll reveal the long-term payoff. Let's get into it. Section 1. Decoding the cosmic formula. Isolating the variables of a cosmic audit. Okay, let's start with Saturn. As you likely know, Saturn gets a pretty bad rap in casual circles, but the Chronos ledger frames it purely as a strict cosmic auditor. It's the planet responsible for delayed outcomes. So it isn't punishing you, it's actively demanding your patience. It deliberately halts your rapid progress just to ensure that your foundation is practically bulletproof. When Saturn is in the mix, overnight success is completely off the table. We live in a world that desperately wants immediate results, instant approvals, fast-tracked applications, but Saturn simply rejects all of that entirely. It forces you to slow down, review every single step, and prove that you've done the foundational work required to actually earn a lasting outcome.
Then, we add Mercury to the mix. If Saturn is our intimidating auditor, the text casts Mercury as the relentless, meticulous clerk. This represents the absolute, non-negotiable need for analysis, data, and comprehensive documentation. Mercury is the energy making sure every single detail is recorded perfectly. Every comma is in place. The precise wording of your agreements. It has to be utterly flawless. Imagine that one person in your office who somehow manages to spot a single typo on page 47 of a dense legal brief. That is the exact energy Mercury brings here. It governs the endless back and forth of communication, constantly seeking clarity and leaving absolutely no stone unturned when it comes to the facts.
And finally, where do these two heavy-hitting planets land? Together in the 8th house. The source material outlines this as the incredibly dense domain of shared resources, taxes, inheritances, insurance, and complex legal disputes. So this isn't the house of your lighthearted daily routine or your weekend hobbies. Not at all. This is the deeply entangled, highly bureaucratic landscape where your money unavoidably mixes with institutions and where hidden matters are forced into the light. Honestly, think of it less as some mystical realm and a whole lot more like the ultimate cosmic IRS waiting room. It's the absolute center of your most serious, deeply entrenched real-world obligations where the stakes are incredibly high.
So, what happens when you synthesize these three elements? You get a highly specific, very challenging, real-world dynamic. The delayed outcomes of Saturn result in incredibly slow processes. Mercury's endless need for analysis triggers constant demands for repeated clarifications, and the 8th house provides a dense, unforgiving landscape of hidden clauses and red tape. You aren't just looking at a slight delay in your plans, you are dealing with a massive cosmic bottleneck. Every single action you try to take in these financial and legal realms is going to be scrutinized, paused, heavily documented, and sent right back for revision. It's literally a perfect storm of institutional friction.
Section 2. The paperwork labyrinth, legal contracts, and red tape.
If you're dealing with this placement, the source text basically guarantees you're going to face notoriously slow legal and administrative matters. Think about the most complex contract you've ever had to sign, maybe a complicated mortgage or a messy business partnership. You absolutely cannot skim the terms and conditions here. And communicating with institutions, that isn't going to be a simple one-and-done phone call. It becomes an exhausting, relentless cycle. You submit a massive stack of documents, the institution finds one minor error, they send the entire packet back, you clarify the issue, and the wheel just keeps turning. It demands an astonishing level of patience, because that bureaucratic ping-pong feels practically endless.
But here's the real kicker. What the Chronos ledger heavily emphasizes is the extreme meticulousness required to avoid setting off institutional traps. A single missing piece of paperwork or a vaguely worded clause in a lease isn't just a minor hiccup that you can casually fix later. No, it triggers major, sweeping setbacks. The meticulous clerk is demanding that you grab a metaphorical magnifying glass and read the fine print. Why? Because the strict auditor is looming right over your shoulder, ready to penalize you heavily if you don't. Technical language suddenly becomes the most significant part of your day, forcing you to understand exactly what you are legally agreeing to.
Section 3. Navigating shared wealth. Finances, trust, and inheritance. Now let's talk about how this cosmic audit applies specifically to other people's money. When you're dealing with financial disputes over shared assets, whether that's a business loan, pooling money with a partner, or dividing an estate, a casual, friendly handshake deal simply shatters under this placement. The source is very clear. Informal agreements fundamentally fail here. Formal negotiation is absolutely 100% required. Because Saturn rules strict, unyielding boundaries, you must lock everything down in writing. If you try to keep things casual just to avoid a little awkwardness, Mercury is eventually going to uncover all those underlying discrepancies, leading to an absolute disaster down the road. You can't rely on trust alone. You literally have to rely on legally binding structure. And this brings us to a super fascinating point the text makes about inheritances. Naturally, you might think an inheritance is just a sudden windfall of free money falling directly into your lap. But the text explicitly points out that you often inherit responsibility along with assets. You might inherit a valuable piece of real estate, sure, but it comes completely wrapped in back taxes, complex zoning debts, or angry tenants. Or maybe you take over a family business only to discover a mountain of heavy administrative burdens. You see, 8th house wealth isn't given freely under the sky. It's completely bound up in Saturn's completely uncompromising demand for absolute responsibility and mature management.
Section 4. The detective's mindset. Deep research and verification.
So, how does living in a constant baseline state of contractual review affect your brain? Well, it completely rewires how you process information. The source points out that trust issues and confidentiality concerns will naturally arise, and that forces you to carefully verify absolutely everything people tell you. You quickly learn to never, ever take things at face value. Now, carrying around that kind of deep suspicion can definitely feel mentally heavy and even isolating at times. But honestly, it brilliantly strengthens your investigative capabilities. You essentially develop a superpower, a highly specialized, forensic-style mind that can spot a critical flaw in the data well before anyone else even notices it's there. You become your own best advocate purely because nobody can out-research you.
Section 5. The long-term payoff. The silver lining of delays.
Okay, so why do we willingly put up with all of this friction? The path to resolution here is fundamentally a massive test of endurance. Step 1. You simply have to endure the incredibly slow process and the completely unavoidable delays. You cannot rush it. Step 2. You engage with that exhausting web of clarification cycles, submitting and resubmitting without ever cutting corners. But if you actually embrace this rigid process, you finally reach Step 3, a firmly stabilized fortress-like resolution. The delays aren't there to stop you from getting what you want. They're actually there to ensure the foundation you're building upon is entirely impenetrable.
The absolute key takeaway from the source is this. Yes, resolution tends to come late, but man, when it gets there, it is firmly planted. Even if the process tests every single ounce of your patience over months or even years, the outcomes are unbelievably durable. When Saturn and Mercury in the 8th house finally sign off on a contract, a massive settlement, or a complex inheritance, it is ironclad. Nobody is going to come back and successfully challenge it. Your meticulous forensic analysis truly pays off by creating a reality that is completely locked in, fully protected, and cannot be easily undone by anyone.
As we wrap up this explainer, just remember that the strict auditor and the meticulous clerk aren't there to ruin your life. They're actually there to aggressively protect your long-term interests in the most vulnerable areas of your world. So based on everything we've uncovered in the Chronos ledger today, I'll leave you with this. Are you prepared to meticulously investigate the hidden clauses in your own life's contracts, or will you just sign blindly and let the fine print decide your fate?